didn't.
Okay.
I started to watch it again. I think I've been doing the stitching thing started, and I've been like, kind of freaking out about it. But I was thinking that, when.
Hold on, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
I was thinking that, when I didn't realize how much resentment I had. I didn't realize what I felt for my mother was resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did just take in my mind, just say, well, I'm just, a shitty daughter, a bad daughter, or whatever, it really does help me to just, acknowledge that and.
Yeah.
And it's like, so what? It's like, it's okay, it happened.
Yeah. Well, do you find it kind of funny that to look at yourself, because I think people get stuck looking at the person that they believe is their persecutor is the problem, that they are the problem, that you are hopeless. Because there's nothing you can do about that person. Your mom is gone, you can't change her, so you're perpetually stuck in this kind of resentment, blame. It's always outside of you. And the moment you go and look at yourself, it's like counterintuitive, don't you think, to go, well, look at you. Maybe you're the problem and you're making all this shit up. And you look at that, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm not powerless. This was all within me. Holy shit, maybe I was wrong. And the relief that can bring.
Yeah, it did bring relief.
Is that surprising to you?
What was really surprising was that I wanted to eat less. I still want to eat more, but I don't want to eat as much as I did before.
That's amazing. So you're connecting the dots to maybe one of the underlying, triggers for you to relate to food is that victim position. I know we've talked about that before, but when you're in resentment, you're a victim. Right? And you're powerless. It's someone else is causing it, right? So if you resolve that relationship and you resolve that resentment, why do you need to feed yourself? You're not being withheld. There's no void that needs to be filled up.
Right. And I found that I'm more at work. I'm more like I'm able to not feel like everything is my fault all the time. Like I noticed a little bit of a change there.
Okay. I want you to just realize, just witness, because that's really what you're doing is you're finding. Don't you agree that what you're finding is kind of natural? It's a natural release. It's not like we are focusing on how to not have this issue at work. It's kind of it's naturally occurring.
Yeah.
So just so that you can kind of maybe get a vision in your mind is the underlying beliefs and stories that you're telling yourself. If you can change those underlying beliefs and you can retell the story from a more loving, compassionate, open-hearted, forgiving position, notice that the way you function in reality naturally changes too. We don't have to work on that.
Yeah, that's
great. There's some YouTube videos where you're realizing it. That's what you're saying. Like, holy shit, all we did was talk about this relationship with my mom. I had some epiphanies. I gave it some grace and some forgiveness, and now I'm existing in a different way. Mm-hmm. How does that happen? And it's natural. It should feel easy and natural. It shouldn't feel like you're forced and trying. So there's a client that I have been working with, and we just finished our time together. And so her YouTubes are in the Patreon account. She was molested by her stepfather from the age of like 6 until she was 13, 14 years old. And she had all these issues, right? With resentment, anger, victim, leave me alone, I'll do it on my own. Like I don't want vulnerability. And she had underlying beliefs that there was something wrong with her, that she deserved it. I know that's not your story, but it's similar in that the work I did with her, we immediately went into her perception of what happened. It's not like we're saying it didn't happen. We just had to change how she perceived her stepfather, that was her persecutor, who did molest her, and changed how she perceived it and how she perceived him, and ultimately how she perceived herself. As soon as she realized, we made these subtle changes in perception, it magnified into major changes in how she lived. She was an absolute binge eater every day, and that's what you're experiencing, right? So it's like, we got to get in there. We got to crack open some of this stuff and get inside. And it's hard to do that if you're focusing on your food, as if food's the problem, right? Because that's kind of what you've been taught to do, is you're addicted to food. Food is the problem. We need to control your food. To me, that's like enabling, because you're still fixating on food. Isn't that what we're trying to get rid of?
Right.
And so that's where, if someone says, I'm a food addict, I'm like, oh yeah, you're just in denial. You're repressing the issues, or you just don't know what they are because you're so fixated on the food. So, right. And so we gotta, which is in direct relation to the fact that you're fixated on your weight equally. Well, underneath all that is a perception that came from childhood. It's a child's viewpoint. And you're not questioning it. You're not looking at it from an adult's position. And usually, and this is really what I think you're coming to find out, is usually the perception someone is holding is a child's perspective, which is very naive, but it's also, I'm a victim. They did it to me. I am a martyr. My life is terrible and you did it. And so you're never going to get out, because you're not taking responsibility. All I did is say, now it's your responsibility, because maybe you were the problem. Best thing ever, right?
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't think that it would be like that, but it is. But when I said that out loud, I was like, I can't believe I just said that, and I feel better. So I immediately denied it, because I'm like, this can't be, it can't be that simple.
It is. It is. But the fact that you get that type of release, what does that tell you about a core part of the problem is? Underlying resentment that you're holding, and victim positionality. And it's also, you're not taking responsibility. You're placing blame, right? Once you take responsibility and you realize too, because inside yourself, and you said this just a second ago, you said, and that, you know what, it's okay. There's nothing I can do about it. I did the best I could. I didn't know any different. It's not like you could, you had this awareness that we just gained today back then and could have changed something. You didn't really even probably understand what you were doing to demonize your mother, right? And what that position might have given you. I mean, you got something out of that. Maybe it was, I don't know. I mean, you can look at that at some point and go, what did I get out of that? To the point where I held on to it so tightly that it hurt myself and it hurt my mom. For what? It's a story. It's just a story. And it's such a one single view of what really was going on. And so by looking at yourself and saying, well, my perception might be flawed. Oh my God, that means that there's a different way to look at it, which means it didn't happen the way that you thought it happened. And you can forgive yourself and your mother and go, okay, and get peace, get some peace, and actually feel connected to her too. That's the other thing that I found with other clients, is that when they take responsibility, and it's not like saying, okay, that client deserved to be molested. No, that's not what I'm saying. It's my perception of myself isn't necessarily correct. There was nothing I did that deserved it. So for her, we had to look at, did you deserve that? Well, fuck no. Did you, is there something wrong with you, which is why he chose you? Because that's what she thought. There's something wrong with me that made me attractive to that. He was attracted to me because I had something wrong with me. So she lived with the belief that there was something wrong with her. And once we changed her perception about that, bam, things just opened up. So for you, did you feel that way about yourself and then maybe blame your mother for it? Or did you think there's something wrong with my mom? Or both?
I thought there was something. I think that I thought that there was something wrong with me, and that was probably because I knew I could never please her, and I really wanted to.
Did she complain about you a lot?
Yeah, and at the same time, I didn't do what she asked me to either. So.
Okay, there you go. Got it. So now you're seeing. So now you're seeing that though. Now you're saying, well, I never really even. I didn't ever. So she was correct, and it was true. I know.
Well, part of it was true, and part of it was I didn't know how.
Well, and you didn't have a voice to say it, and this is where you have a voice now, so you can see more of a bigger picture. Would you agree?
Well, it's easier for me just to say, I couldn't live up to her standards and be done with it.
Yeah, but that's blame. You see what I'm saying?
I'm taking responsibility for not meeting her, for not doing what she wanted me to do.
No, there's that, but there's also compassion for why. So you might have just said no out of your own fear of not being able to do it. You might have not done it because you were didn't want the feeling of inadequacy. You didn't want her to know, I feel inadequate. I can't do it. I don't know what to do. I'm afraid to make a mistake. There's feelings internally you probably had that created maybe a paralysis or a sabotage. And then you blamed her. You know what I'm saying? Like that's one way to look at it. That's one way a child would respond for sure. I'm not in it. So you're going to have to go in there and go, oh yeah, I could see that she said, let's do this. I felt inadequate. I didn't do it. And then she'd get upset. And then I would be like, she's the problem. Her standards, I can never meet them. She's perfect. She doesn't like me. She hates me. The internal conversation of a child, think about what that child is going to be thinking. Not as an adult, you don't have the context to have any, you just create an assumption and then believe it. My mom doesn't like me. You just believed that thought. It's a child.
Yeah, but I also believe it. I mean, for whatever reason, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And
oh, I see what you're saying. So you really literally didn't do it.
Right. I mean, I did. There were so many things that I.
Are you saying by choice?
Well, it's like I couldn't control my eating. In my mind, I couldn't control it. I was always doing things that I couldn't understand why I wouldn't do it, and then there were things that I would do just out of defiance, like being kind of being passive aggressive, like not cleaning my room.
Correct. That
really messy.
Yeah, that right there. So what you're seeing is I was absolutely contributed to it.
Yeah, because I would get so upset when I felt like I was doing my best and it wasn't, and she would chastise me for it. It would make me angry, so I would become, I couldn't really.
Yeah, hateful.
I couldn't do anything. So I would, it's like I would go to when she would go to work, I would go to the store and buy brownie mix and make brownies in the oven and clean up everything, and the kitchen would be spotless when she got back, so she wouldn't know that I'd done it.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, when we were together, like I would make breakfast and make eggs, and I would leave the the egg stuff in the pan and
Mm-hmm.
put it in the sink, and that would make her just so angry. And she would, and I didn't even realize that I was doing that.
Correct, but
when I
you could see though from a parent's perspective how frustrating that would be. Especially if she's like,
Yeah,
just clean up your shit, just clean it up, and
yeah.
you're just
And I never
defiant.
cleaned up. I
Correct.
never cleaned up my stuff unless I was trying to hide something from her.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
I
what
wonder if she picked that up. Like the house is really clean. What's going on?
I don't know. I think if I had had, like obsessive compulsive cleaning disorder, whatever that is, instead of food problems, like we would have never had any issues ever.
Well, that's
Because
kind of
when the house was clean, when the house was clean, she was okay. But I was like, I would spend like, for what in my mind, this is how I remember it, I would spend all the time cleaning my room, and she would come in there and she would say, well, this is a good start, and I would be so devastated because I hated cleaning, and so it's like no matter what it's like I hated cleaning because no matter what I did, like 5 minutes later it would just be messy, and it was just so stressful. Cleaning was so stressful to me because nothing ever stayed clean, and I never, and I hated it, and so I never did it, and I never, she was always working and always doing stuff, and in her mind, well, it was true. I didn't help out, I didn't carry my weight, and I didn't, keep.
So if you take responsibility, can you see that your mother really isn't as awful as you made her out to be?
No, and if I had stayed on the diet, probably if I had stayed on, I didn't stay on the diet from the very beginning. If I had stayed on the diet at all, I felt really guilty about that. And she was a diabetic, and she kept candy in her purse. And so I would steal her candy. And so when she would go to the candy to keep her blood sugar from dropping too low, and there was none in there, she would, it was a problem. So I would always make sure to leave like a couple pieces in there. I mean, that was terrible. I did shit like that, and I mean, it was just stuff that
have you
get
ever
on anyone's nerves.
Well, good, and I'm glad that you're coming to that. Is this what you've been thinking about over the course of since we talked a couple days ago? Just going through reality, like let's go into reality, what it might have been like. It's not that.
Yeah, I was. I just, I'm sure that I was very hard. From someone that wanted. She was a person that liked everything to be clean and had to live with me, and take care of this person. She did a lot of nice things for me.
Yeah.
She would make my Halloween costumes by hand.
Oh, and that's pretty special. Yeah. She really, that's pretty cool.
She sent me to camp. She would drive me, an hour and a half to take me to the dermatologist to get medicine for my, my face. And she did, she probably thought I was ungrateful. And then when I got mad at her.
Well, at the time, you can look at how you positioned yourself with her with resentment and why she's your enemy. You made your mom your enemy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, have you ever thought that she really did love you? And she really did do a good job? Your mind, what you believed in your mind, separated you two. Made it worse.
Well, I mean, she would say things to me like, like if.
Just go into what I said. I know. Just go into what I said. Try not to just go into it. Have you ever thought that she was actually a great mother and she loved you adequately? You just had a belief and feelings that really created distance. And you did it somewhat intentionally. Right? Because not only did you resented her, you also felt bad about yourself, and then created, would do things out of defiance intentionally, but at the same time you didn't, and I want to keep that, you didn't know this. You weren't aware of what you were doing, so it's not like it was intentional. And how that might have made her relationship with you and your relationship with her strained. She probably thought you were extremely difficult. And you're looking at it going, I think I was actually.
Yeah, I can see how she would think that I was difficult.
Well, and she was probably in her mind thinking we need structure, we need order. Was she a single mom?
Yeah.
And so she probably felt inadequate and a single working mom. I mean, there's so much that goes into parenting, and I know that now as a parent myself with 3 kids. I realize that my children can make up anything they want to believe about me and believe it. They have no idea where reality is as a child, how parents, how adults are, what we're managing in a day, right? They're only managing themselves, right? And how we relate to them. And so if I say something or I turn my head wrong, or my voice inflexes change differently, they can make whatever they want up about me and believe it until they're an adult. If they don't voice it or there's no communication or I'm not given the option of explaining something, I'm left as their persecutor and I have to be okay with that. That's the hardest part when you're working with children is if they believe their own thoughts, you're so screwed as a parent. You can't do anything right. Like I told you about my sister-in-law, my daughter-in-law, excuse me, my niece with her dad. He was the devil. She treated him as if it was catastrophic, traumatic person who tortured her, murdered people, and molested her. And he never did anything like that, right? All based on what she believed in her mind about him. And he had to just sit there and accept it. Because what do you do? What do you do? You don't even know what you're working with when you're working with a child. It's very difficult. Until they're adults. Right now you're an adult and you're telling the story. And I'm probably the first person that ever said, you might want to check yourself. Look at yourself. You know what I mean? Who does that? And the first time you look at yourself, you see the truth and it's freeing for you. It's like, oh my God. What you might start noticing is not only are you forgivable, but your mom is forgivable. And you might, even though she's passed away, you might feel connected to her. Like, oh, I love her. And I know she loves me. And in the spiritual sense, you can reconnect with your mother that way. I wonder what it was really like. I wonder what she thought, how she felt about this. Because you're an adult now and you could have a conversation with her, in a different context. The problem is you were an adult when she died, but it was under one context: defiance, resentment, anger, victim, shame within yourself. I am not good enough. I'm a complete, feeling like you were inadequate and a failure, but at the same time projecting it onto her as if she did you wrong. That's hard, right?
Yeah.
Plus, not really understanding, too, adding to that dieting bullshit. That's like, your mom did the best she could under the circumstances. At the time, dieting was the thing to do. You put your kids on diets. Nowadays, do you think it's recommended to put children on diets?
I have no idea.
No, it's not. Last thing you want to do. Like there's so much more research around it. How it affects them psychologically, children who have parents who shame their bodies. I mean, there's so much more knowledge that we didn't have 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It was more common. Put your kid on Weight Watchers. Holy shit, you're asking for a child to have food issues when you do that. And so how you responded to food at the time, you're so normal. You're so normal. And the younger you put a kid on a diet, the worse their binging is going to be. And they don't know why. It's not like you're consciously aware of why food is really important to you and why you're having to hide it. You're just being an animal and you're doing what your animal brain and animal instincts are telling you to do. So, again, go back 30 years. Nowadays, no, there's so much more knowledge. There's so much more, and again, not every parent knows this, and there's a lot of parents who put their kids on their own specific diets, but psychologically, if someone's educated, it's like, no. You don't put your kids on a diet. And you don't demonize food in front of your kids. There's so much knowledge about this, but then again, I'm in it, and I'm aware of all this knowledge that's out there, but You just have to give the whole thing so much grace. It's no different than me giving, the religious indoctrination so much grace. My parents did the best they could with what they thought was the right thing for their children, based on what they believed about God and rules and hell and heaven, and they imposed that on us, and that's how I was raised, and it ended up with horrible psychological illness and suicidal depression. Is that what they wanted for me? Fuck no. But that's what happened. Right? I don't know if that makes any sense. Your mom wanted you to lose weight. They put you on a diet because that's what people recommended. Freaking doctors. I have so many clients whose doctors gave them weight loss medication as children.
Well, that's one thing that the doctors would never do.
That's because they were probably a little bit more well-rounded, but that wasn't uncommon back in the 1980s to put a child on a strict diet. It's just, you're asking for someone. If you do that to your child will end up with binge eating disorders-ish. There's going to be something wrong there. You're going to have hiding, hoarding. There's going to be issues because you're stimulating that primal psychological reaction. Remember when we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how our foundation of our psychological well-being is this awareness that food is safe and it's abundant and it's always there, right? So as soon as there is threat to that, we become attached to the food. And so for you, the scarcity of these types of food made them very important to you. So when you start to have this overly magnified relationship with food as a consequence of being deprived, you're developing emotional, kind of social emotional, you're developing emotionally, and when you're having normal social insecurities, instead of facing it, you're relying on food now because you have this distorted relationship with food. So now you have secondary issues, right? But you're masking it because you're relating to food. So you start to have these relationships with food under certain emotional triggers. And you're now 30 years later, still in it. You still have these issues with food, partly, right, because of, you can see the connection between, if I continue to diet, I will continue to have these impulses to eat. But you now have to look at what's underneath it all, which is how you identified yourself and how you feel about your life. That really is, I think, at the core of your self-concept, who you think you are, how you identify yourself socially as a person. If your story of who you are is my mother sucked, how are you going to fix this? I am a victim. The client, for example, who was molested, if she identifies as someone who's been molested, is she ever going to recover?
You mean, is it something that she's molested and that's her
identity?
There's nothing.
That's me. No. That happened to me. That's, I'm gypped. My life will suck forever. They identify by, it defines them, right? You're defined by it. I guess my question for you is, do you feel, and just be truthful, let it come up, do you feel that how you related to your mother and feeling the resentment you had has defined you? Like you let it define you. It's part of the idea of who you are in your life.
Yeah, I let what I thought her opinion of me was define who I am.
Yes, and that's why it's so probably releasing for you to realize that opinion is probably not even true.
I don't know, but it's freeing to take responsibility, to accept the fact that
maybe it's true.
Okay that I didn't.
Well, maybe
that it's true.
That it's true.
Okay.
That means your mom didn't. I love that. Nope, I like it. I see what you're saying now. It's not that you were wrong. She did criticize you, but it was legit. It wasn't unfair. That's what you're saying. So it means that she wasn't wrong. She was correct. So she didn't do anything wrong. And neither did you. You're just being yourself.
I think in her mind, because of what, in her, and how she's, like, you know, like, for example, if you meet a guy and he's not, and you're not for him, you know, it's not your fault. It's kind of the same thing. It's like, I'm not the person she wanted me to be, but I'm okay with that. Like, I'm not.
Yep.
I'm not.
Yes, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
And I do feel kind of like when I say I was a shitty daughter, it's because I couldn't be the person, you know, in her mind, I wasn't. You know, she had so many dreams for me, you know. Yeah. She didn't want me to end up the way that I did, and I felt, you know, when I meet, like, when I meet the man that she married, my father, when I met him, you know, and I saw how he lived and his standards, you know, I realized that I was never going to live up to either one of, they were never going to want to be someone that they would want to, you know, just to hang out with, you know, whatever, because I'm just not, I don't know, I have different, I'm just different.
Yeah. No, I am too. I'm not going to lie, right? This was like I said, the religious stuff for me. Like, I can't be not this. My family will not accept me if I'm not in that box. They don't even know how to relate to me if I'm not there. So I can't be real. I can't have real, authentic, I can't even have a conversation because I have to comply to their limitations. I can't just tell them my feelings. I can't just be me. I can't be defiant in any way. You know, so, and if I do, I'm a loser. I'm inferior. There's something wrong with me. You know, I feel like I connect with what you just said. Personally.
Yeah, I don't have to be a loser in my eyes, but in her eyes I am, and that's okay.
And that's okay. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the good thing, right? It's like, well, she's right relative to those ideas. She's right. Yeah. And but to her, that was love, right? She loved you so much. She wanted that rightness for you. Not realizing that it wasn't good for you. It wasn't good for you. She just didn't know anything else. Would she have known what was right and good for you? No, there's no possible way. Who does she know what is right and good for? Herself. Because she's the only one living inside that space. So I've often said this with other clients who are also parents. You're actually doing with your children what is right for you. It's super selfish, but you don't know any different. You're just trying to, you know, it's like you take from what your parents didn't do and what they did do, and you think, well, what would have been better for me? And then you're doing that to your children. It's super selfish. What's right for your children, right? Well, how do we know? I have no idea. Unless my children can voice it, express it, I won't know. Right? So, like I said to you earlier, I'm messing my kids up right now involuntarily because I'm treating them the way I wish I would have been treated. I'm giving them tons of freedom the way that I wish I had freedom. And you know what? One of my kids is going to be like, why didn't you raise me with a religion? And they're going to be pissed at me. You know what I mean? So your mother is so goddamn innocent. She did the best she could with what she was aware of was right. And what was right for her is what she wanted for you. And my God, that is love. She loved you a whole lot. You know, and the defiance, the hard part is your defiance probably sabotaged any, you know, this, how she was and how you were. You just like oil and water, right?
Yeah.
But if you blame her, now you're in trouble. So when you open yourself up and go, okay, she was right. This was her. It was my way of dealing with this. And my way of dealing with it was probably pretty shitty. So I can't sit here and play the victim. I participated. I participated in the whole codependent drama triangle crap that she probably didn't have words for because that codependent drama triangle research didn't occur until the 90s, right? Her master's degree didn't include current stuff that I'm talking to you about, you know?
Yeah. I don't even remember
what her focus was on. Well, you know, it could have been child development. Who freaking knows? But in the end, she did the best job she could, and you just have to love them as individuals. That as a single person, as a single mom, under what she was dealing with personal issues she needed to resolve, she did what she thought was right for you, and clearly you didn't have a voice to be able to express that or to just adapt to her. Just adapt to her. You know, again, I want to add, as a child being forced to restrict food, you're dealing with survival mode shit way too soon. Way too soon in your life, because that's triggering the animal instinct to eat food, which is going against the dieting that she wanted you to do, thinking it was the right thing for your health or right thing. You know what I mean? And you're not unaware of that, and she's unaware of that, and all of a sudden you're sitting in front of me, and we're just now delving into that, right? 40 years later.
Yeah. Yep.
So you have to take a step back from your childhood and go, oh my God, all right, let's just start over. Just start over. Let's just bury the hatchet and love her and love you. Now that you know yourself better, and you can just say, I'm good. I had a good childhood. I really did, even though it was hard in my head, but it couldn't have been any different. You know? Now, obviously, if you had to go back right now, if you literally were like, I'm going to snap my fingers, you're going to be 4 years old again. But you can keep what your wisdom about this. What would you do different? Knowing you can't change anything. You can't change your mom. You can't change, but all you can change is your perceptions of everything. What would you do different?
Oh, gosh, I don't know, because she was still my mom, and I was still that young.
No,
I still wanted to do what she wanted me to.
You would have, yes, say that again. You would have done what she wanted you.
I still would have wanted to do what she wanted me to. But I remember when, like, I always did what she said. And then when she put me on the diet, that was the first time I'd ever, you know.
Became defiant. Yeah, hid.
Became defiant.
Yes.
I did, you know.
Well, that makes sense, right? You should make sense to you. All of a sudden, she's threatening your food supply, and you have to perform for her, and you're feeling deprived.
But you know, in the beginning, all she did was say, because we used to eat out for dinner every day, and we would eat at this little they had grocery stores that had little diners in them back then.
Yeah.
And they had the bakery, and so we would go to the diner to eat, and then she would let me go to the bakery and pick out a dessert. Well, when she put me on the diet, that was the restriction. I couldn't go to the bakery and pick out the dessert.
Well, and did that make you feel kind of sad? Were you like, what?
That's when the obsession started. I mean, I just remember it very clearly. Like, that's when I started obsessing about.
Okay, so notice when it was triggered. Was it triggered by the sugar, or was it triggered by the fact that you weren't allowed to do something that sounds like as a child was really special for you? Like, you really loved that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I didn't know what was wrong with me. So when I found, you know, Overeaters Anonymous and FA, you know, that's what they told me. So
that you're addicted to the sugar.
And actually, it was a doctor that referred me to Overeaters Anonymous.
Hold on a second. They told you that you were addicted to sugar.
Well, no, at Overeaters Anonymous, they told me I was a compulsive overeater, and then when I found FA, they told me I was addicted to flour and sugar. And not FA, but I think it was another knockoff of.
Yeah, sure.
And they wrote a book. The lady wrote a book, and I read the book. And it talked about flour, sugar, and wheat.
Oh my God, you just need to move away from that, because that is the most. Can you see that now?
It makes sense, because when I was having all these problems with my skin, there was a time when I was able to stay on a diet, and that's the only time my skin ever cleared up. And I didn't eat any processed foods. That was all you know.
You weren't binging. You weren't binging at the time. Is it really about the food? They love to blame the food. That is such a myopic, that's a sign that they're still in survival mode. And they're like, that's the bear. And they're fixating on that.
Well,
It's just so short-sighted and closed-minded. There's no underlying issues being addressed, right? It's not freaking food. That's why I brought that up. I was like, can you see that it wasn't about the dessert. It was, you weren't allowed something you enjoyed with your mom. It was probably a special time between you and her. It was pretty rewarding for you. It wasn't the food that was rewarding. It probably, more than anything, was like something you felt connected with her.
It was more than that. It was like I felt like I was being punished because I looked different. And I remember people started treating me differently that hadn't treated me differently before just because I gained weight.
Yeah.
And here I was not allowed to have the cupcake.
And you're being punished. Yeah.
And I'm being punished.
Mm-hmm. So is it about the cupcake? Is it really about the cupcake? Or is it about what you're talking about? The punishment, the fact that yours...
Yeah,
okay, right? Do you see? That's what I meant. It's like, this has nothing to do with the freaking cupcake. It's way more than that. Not only are you being deprived of it, you're being deprived of what symbolism that it might have given to you, your time with your mom and you when you moved. That's hard alone at a time where you're moving and there's chaos and you have no friends, right? But also the fact that you are being punished for something that wasn't really an issue until it was an issue. I don't know. It's so much. It's not the flour and the sugar. That to me is that's a cop out. Don't address reality. Let's just talk about and blame the food. Like there's no other detail, right? Like you just said, I felt so punished because of my weight. That's a big deal right there. Now we're talking about the issues. You know, this is why it's like, why just fixate on the cupcake when there's real shit going on underneath it that is actually creating the pressure to eat the cupcake. It's not the cupcake that brings the pressure. It's all these issues underneath it that pressurize it. And if you're going to be restricted, can you see if you start to get resentful and pissed off why you would go get the cupcake and 5 more? It's like a big F you. It's like a big F you to eat it. It's self-preservation. It's like saying, I'm going to take care of myself. So it's self-defense. It has nothing to do with the cupcake. So anyway, yeah, you're seeing that. You're seeing that. We don't need to talk about that. We've already gone through that work. So going underneath it, you can go, well, of course I would do that. Any kid would do that. All people would do that. Who wouldn't do that? You know, go back to that time. Who wouldn't hide a cupcake and eat the whole thing? Who wouldn't under that circumstance?
Yeah.
You know, with those feelings and perceiving it the way you perceived things and how it felt. You know, what child isn't going to feel all of a sudden deprived and punished when it's part of the way you hang out with your mom, something you look forward to? All of a sudden, it's not just, oh, we're going to cut back. It's, you can't eat it. You're not allowed to. Put yourself in any child's position. What child isn't going to go, but what? Not only...
Well, it put a strain on our relationship because when I gained the weight, then I couldn't fit in my clothes, and we had to special order my clothes, and then my mother actually, I think one year, my mother went to a seamstress and had, like, clothes made for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you know, if I was teased at school, she would... You know, in our mind, it was like, well, I've done everything to help you, and you're not complying, so, you know, that's what you serve. So there was a lot of resentment there, you know, because I really didn't want to eat, but yet I was compelled to eat. So I felt like, she was kicking me in the stomach. So, and I did begin to, you know, really, and she would get so angry at me, you know, when I couldn't, you know, when I would gain weight. And
hold on, when you would hide and obviously the weight gain is a natural thing that's going to happen if you're hoarding and hiding food out of fear of it getting taken from you, and just self-preservation. Again, self-preservation.
Yeah.
That's the thing with food, and that's what they found in the research. I think I told you this before, when they studied the different reasons why they studied these 3 different groups, same exact food deprivation, but they gave them different reasons and meanings to do it, and they put them in different environments. The first group was, this is a fast, spiritual purpose, have a reason, and that's why you're doing this. The second group was, you're doing this to lose weight, and they removed all the food except for what they were to eat. The third group was, you're doing this to lose weight, and they had to restrict with all the food in the house, with everybody else eating other things, going out in public, they were to still eat the same exact food. So the third group was to stay restricted, but be aware of everything everybody else gets to eat and they can't. Okay, which group do you think? And they actually said, they were looking at the compensatory behaviors of which group would have bigger impulses to overeat. So what do you think, of all the 3, which group do you think had binge eating symptoms?
The third one.
Yep.
You asked me the other time.
Correct. Yeah, the third one. It has to do with feeling that you're being withheld from food, because it's all around you. And so it's a feeling of being deprived. It is being taken from me. So it puts you in a position of self-defense with the food. Now, how is someone at the age you were? How old were you?
How old am I now?
How old were you when you recall that eating the cupcake?
I was 7.
Okay, so I want you to imagine that you're 7 years old dealing with those feelings. What do you think that 7-year-old's going to do? Steal food.
Yeah, but I want to say too, there's a difference, because in that, and because I've always been restricted, but the first restriction was when I was born, or when I was 1-year-old or whatever. I became allergic to dairy products, so I couldn't have them, and that was that. It's just like that story you just said. I couldn't have it because of health reasons, so it wasn't a big deal. I mean, I missed it, like when there would be cake at a party or something.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like it wasn't a personal attack against who I was as a
No, so you
person.
wouldn't have.
That's why I gained the weight, was because when I turned 7, I was no longer, I outgrew the allergy.
And you compensated.
Stuff that I couldn't have. So if someone had realized that and just said, "Oh, just leave her alone,"
it'll balance out. Yeah, it's gonna balance out, because she'll get sick and she'll go, "Oh, I can't do that anymore." I've let my kids puke in sickness, eating too much. No shame, no guilt. I just let it right out. They'll figure it out, and it did, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, and I have friends they're parents of children who hide, won't buy candy, and their kids are the ones that come to my house and eat all the food. I always know which parents are food deprivers by how their kids respond at my house.
Yeah. I had a friend whose grandmother, her grandmother she kept telling me this big story about, if I came over to her house, the excuse just, don't pay attention to her grandmother because she was really mean. And we went over there, and her grandmother makes this big country breakfast, like every morning.
Biscuits and gravy and
yeah.
Oh, yum, my favorite. Well, that is my favorite.
I've never had biscuits and gravy. My mom, that was one thing my mom didn't want me to ever have. So
it is so good.
So she made this I got up like Saturday morning, and she had made this, big, huge breakfast with biscuits, gravy, eggs, pancakes, everything. And I ate, I just kept eating, and she just loved me because nobody would eat her food, and nobody thought it was a big deal. And here I was, this woman was making homemade food that I never had before.
Yeah, and you're in heaven.
Me to eat it. And she, after she told, the girl named Pam, she said, that I could come over anytime. And Pam was like, she was just shocked because nobody appreciated her food, I guess, in the house.
Oh, I love it. You probably felt pretty safe over there, huh?
I remember looking at her and saying, how can you be thin with a grandmother like this? How can you be thin with all this? I just couldn't understand.
Yeah, well, they get that food it's because they get that food all the time. It loses its appeal. Eventually you're like, eh.
Well, I understand that now.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. So, and for you, it was such a novelty. I mean, food, it sounds like when you grew up with your mom's issues and that food was always an issue. There was how much restriction did you were born with restriction, like you said. And how much of that plays into how important food became to you. As a child, again, going back to what I was telling you about that feeling of being deprived, the moment you were told you can't eat that, you get it, but now you can't. How did that feel? Pissed. You probably felt that resentment. That was the beginning of all this, like, yeah. And I know, when you say, I really did want to deprive, but you didn't know what you were dealing with, right? You're dealing with, feeling disconnected from food, which is primal. It's so important to survival. So you're not allowed to participate. And then a child, again, who's 7 and 8 years old, is feeling these feelings of self-defense. So you're living in a defense mechanism with food. And you're feeling bad about it, not knowing why you're doing it. Again, go have some compassion for that little girl who was put in these positions. No one knew that's what was going to happen. The thing is, not one parent believes or is aware that as soon as you put a child on a diet, you are giving them morbid obesity and eating disorders. Period.
Yeah, I'm sure if my mom had understood all that, we would have had a different relationship. And
with food.
Everything would have been a different.
Oh, totally. Oh, you got it. And you know what? The other thing is the fear that she probably carried about your weight, and that was projected onto this. She was afraid for you. She probably was just, it's just so hard to be a mom. Let me just tell you. Her own issues.
I imagine.
Yeah.
I hear about other people, other friends talk about, they're my age, to talk about their parents, and they're still mad.
And you're going to have problems. You're going to have problems.
I'm so glad I didn't have kids, because, can you imagine having babies and having given birth and all your money into them, and they grow up and hate you?
Well, and you're not, and the thing is that's not always the case. I have a very good relationship with my kids, at least now, until they realize how messed up I am, and they are too, and we'll find that out later. But you have to also consider the generational differences. Your mother's generation and where culture was in the 1970s and 80s, and how different it is now. How different the diet industry. The diet industry is more savage. It's more manipulative. It's more extreme and radicalized. Back then, it was so dumb. It was just straight. There wasn't a whole lot of intelligence in it. And so there was that is the benefit of today, is we now have all the consequences of that generation. We are resolving it. You and I we were experiments, right, of the 80s. The X generation essentially was a big experiment for the parents that were baby boomers. They didn't want to do it the way that their parents did it. It was too restrictive. It was too stifling. It was too misogynistic. They were in the 60s. But there was this narcissistic boom in the 1970s and 80s around, religious supremacy. And there's, consumerism was a really big deal. Who you were in status was such a big deal at that time. And I don't know. I just feel like we're coming out of it. We're trying to fix the damages. And the best thing we can do for ourselves is to just forgive everything. Forgive what they did. They did the best they could. We just need to get our shit together now and come out of it. And if you blame them, if we blame the generation, if we blame our parents as if they should have known better, we're so screwed, right? We just have to surrender it and say, you know what? I'm doing the best I can. They did the best they can. And I need to resolve these issues so that I can move forward, So I'm not stuck there, and that's where you've been, is stuck in that state, stuck in that space. And that's what it should feel like. Like I'm stuck in that. I'm stuck with this relationship with my mother. I'm stuck in how I feel with food. And how do I release myself from it? Well, we have to release every angle. You have to release diets, because that's obviously what you've been fighting. You have to release, to do that, you have to release this idea that your body is worthy of shame and it needs to be fixed, because that's ultimately why you self-impose the dieting, because you believe that, right? You have to be able to look at how you've related to food and recognize that it's been very much a defiant act for you of self-preservation. And it's specifically usually in times you feel inadequate, times you feel insecure and resentful. Right? Was that overwhelming what I just said?
A little bit.
Okay. It's really not that complicated. I know that just sounded super complicated, like, oh my God, I'm never going to get fixed. It's very simple. Look at how simple it was just to release yourself from the resentment with your mother. Just look at what happened, how simple and easy that was.
Yeah, but I mean, it's helpful to know it's not just one thing. It's not just the dieting, and it's not all. It's more than one thing, because I used to think it was just one thing.
Yeah, food. Food. Yeah. Well, and the food is only there because of the dieting. And the dieting's only there because of your body image. And the body image is there because you feel inadequate. So we got to go deeper. Yeah, and that's what we're doing. Right now we're kind of getting a lot deeper.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot. It's 40 years of shit.
Here's something I want to open you up to. I've worked with people older than you that have been doing this for longer. And it's not a time issue. It's not going to take 40 years for you to come out of this. It's you've been holding on to these perceptions and beliefs, and it's a matter of letting them go, right? So again, look at how quickly you felt the shift happen when you released yourself from the belief of how you thought about yourself and your mom. How did that take time to feel a shift, to feel a difference? I mean, it's been, what, 2 days?
Yeah, right. No.
It was instant.
And I hear what you're saying, too, about, when I was thinking about yesterday when I went and I bought some Oreos. And the only reason I bought them is because they were, one of those forbidden foods. But, as I was listening to you talk, I realized that, it's just, I don't know what the word is. Oh, God, what's the word? It's, what's the word?
Habit? I don't know. I don't know what context.
What's left over from all of that dieting I did?
Oh yeah, totally. Right?
It's because that's what it's supposed to happen based on what I was doing to myself.
For as long, yes,
So I ate I ended up eating the whole bag of Oreos, and then I felt bad.
Physically.
Even though, no, I didn't because I've been eating so much lately.
Oh, you're used to it.
Sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I ate some more and something else, and that did make me. Then I stopped. I just stopped in the middle of it, and I didn't eat. And I actually saved the rest of the food and didn't eat it till today. So that was amazing. But now I see why I ate as much as I did. Is because I was still, I wasn't attuned to the fact that that's what I do, because I've been restricting
for so long
this whole time.
Well, and you're also thinking, and there's also, don't forget, it's not just how long you've been restricted and I can't eat that, and then the self-preservation of it, but if you believe you can't, that a diet's going to come back, can you see why it would be so ferocious? Because you have to get it in before you're going to get deprived again. So I'm going to tell you what I would have told you when you were like 7. This is never going to go away. Never. It'll never go away. Those Oreos will be there every day for the rest of your life. So you don't have to get it in all right now. Tell me how that would have changed things for you.
I ate some, I was just thinking how good they tasted. And I ate the whole bag, and they still tasted good.
I know. You're still, it's not about the taste. You need to get over that. So there's probably, like I said, underlying issues there with stress, or you probably felt bad while you were eating them, or whatever. Go back to my question. I need you to really first of all, recognize the truth in what I just told you. It's not about the taste of the goddamn Oreos. It's not. I know you know that.
It's about the
freedom, not having to feel bad. And you eat the whole thing. Correct. It has nothing to do with the Oreos. So I need you to be aware of that lie when you say it. It's not true. You were told that.
Yeah.
I know. See?
It's not a forbidden food.
I know. So let me ask the question again, and now give me the real answer, because that was I need the real answer now. Okay. If you go back to that 7-year-old girl who's all of a sudden, just imagine that cupcakes will be there every day for the rest of your life. They're never going away.
Allowed to eat them.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not bad for you. They're always going to be here. And you know what? You'll find on your own that when you eat too much, you get sick. And you won't want to eat them for a long time. It's kind of like getting drunk on tequila. You probably aren't going to have tequila for a long time if you get wasted on it and get hungover. Right?
Yeah.
Problem is if you were to tell someone you're never going to get that again, you're ever your whole life, and you're a bad person if you do it. They're going to get it, and they're going to hide. And then they're going to think about it. And then they're going to want it. And then they want it some more, So what would change? Now, I want you to make this real. Really let this sink in, Heather. Let it permeate and let it become true in your mind, okay? Because part of this is like, yeah, this isn't true. Make it real. I want you to imagine I'm your mom, okay? You could have Oreos the rest of your life. There's nothing wrong. You've done nothing wrong. You can have them every day for every meal forever. They're never going away. Ever.
No, I probably want something else.
No, is that a truthful statement or what? You're not making that up.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to have them for every meal, I probably wouldn't want them for every.
Well, and they're never going to go away. They're never going away.
You telling me that would make me not want them as much.
Correct. So now they become like, okay, I don't have to have them now. So there's no pressure to eat them now because you can have them later if you want some, or later, or the next day, or in a month, or it doesn't matter. They're always there. Yeah. You can have them anytime you want. They're not going away. You've done nothing wrong. There's no reason for you to eat it all right this second. Just think about how that would change things for you if you knew all food, bread, crackers, candy, sugar, it's never going away for the rest of your life, every single day, permanently, how that would change the pressure with it. The other part of this, right, because there's that aspect that we have to get you to release yourself from, is just relax into this food. There's that. Then there is, and you've done nothing wrong, and you're not a bad person. It's kind of like we got to go back to when you started this shit. You need to be 7 years old again and start acting like that, meaning you need to go back to where you were at that point and where you started this kind of strained relationship with food and your mom and your body and the food and your mom and your body and the food. And we got to get you to let's do a do-over. It's time to have a do-over. Let's rethink this, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Let's first forgive your mom and forgive yourself. Give it an understanding. And let's ask, should you really feel that bad about your weight? Is it really something to feel that bad about? Is there no like respect to how this happened, Is there no context? There's no story behind it. Well, there's a story behind it. You know what I mean? Like this isn't what it just is. Like there's a real tragedy here that's behind it.
Well, there is a tragedy. When when I look in the mirror, I try to. Yesterday, I was like, okay, just remember this is because of what happened. Because when I look in the mirror, I just want to. It's just like, my God, I just.
Yeah, what I want you to see is that little girl. Just, does she deserve to be ashamed of this, really?
No.
You need to, so instead of shaming the body and what has happened, because you can look at the body and go, well, of course this is what has happened. Not, well, it's like under these circumstances and and how I coped and how I believed things, this is what would happen under the circumstance. I mean, I became very resentful, resenting being deprived. If you resent deprivation, what you gonna do? What are you gonna do? If you resent being deprived, you're gonna binge and you're gonna feel entitled to it and it's gonna be earned and I deserve, and there's anger and rage that you've described. Under the circumstances, not just that, but all of them. This is what's gonna happen. Do you hear the compassion in how I'm looking at it? Like, oh, there's a story behind this. And this was a hard one. It's a tragedy. And it doesn't have to continue. Right? You don't have to continue what you're doing. Can you have some love for the situation? Can you, when you see the body and you see what's happened, can you feel not sad? I don't want you to feel sorry for yourself. That's not what I'm saying. I just want you to have some compassion for the torment that this has taken. The total outright suffering that this has required for you to get here. Not just physically, I'm talking psychologically. Screw the physical part of it. It's the psychological suffering that this requires someone to have and to live with. You've been living with it. It's not the body's fault. It's not the body that I'm talking about that's the suffering. I'm talking psychologically. The shame, the pressure, the isolation, the fact that you feel so poorly about it that you believe you shouldn't eat ever, and how that really kind of feeds into the resentment and feeling deprived and pissed and anger and rage and getting your food again, and then the shame about it. I mean, again, I want you to take a step out of it and look at it and really give it compassion. Like, oh my God, of course I'm going to get this big. Yes. Anybody with this way of looking at things and this deprivation and how I responded is going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when can you just, can you let it be done now? You know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Just, this is where, and I think I've had this conversation with you before, and it might have a little more depth and meaning to you. Can you just accept that it has been a failure up to this point? A total failure. Boom. Bomb. It sucked.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to fix this. It'll, it's like if you put yourself in a coma, what do you think the body's going to do? It'll fix itself. But do you really need to focus on it anymore? Does that child need to focus on her weight some more?
No.
She just,
that's the problem.
Let it be. You have to let it be. You have to let it be.
Right.
Let it be. I have a neighbor across the street. There's a couple, and they have a daughter who is probably 11, 12. She's going through puberty right now, but her legs don't work. Her feet flop. She crawls on her arms, and she also has a wheelchair. She's going through adolescence, total paraplegic. She was born, I don't know what she has. She might have something where it kills her nervous. She used to have arm things. She could walk with arms, her arm braces, and now she can't. Is it MS? I don't think it's MS.
It could be.
So I want you to categorize yourself as disabled. It's like, that's the truth. And it's not a bad thing. It's actually very understandable. You have lived a pretty tragic, traumatic everything. And you participated in it, not knowing that you were participating in it. You didn't know. And if you want to be done, you just need to be okay with this. You need to let it rest. You need to just put your weapon down and stop. The only way to do that is to not make your weight a problem. You just have to accept it. Because if once you accept this, you can move on. You can move on mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And that's what you need to do. That's what needs to get healed. If you can't do that, how is that feeling of I have to fix this and I have to deprive, are you going to escape this cycle?
Yeah, I get it.
What was the answer? Can you escape this cycle if you have to fix your weight?
No, it's the same mind.
Mm-mm.
The same mind.
Well, let me explain this to you. If you have to fix your weight, are you going to escape the cycle?
I have to fix my weight.
If you have to fix your weight, are you going to escape this cycle?
No, because it'll always go back to restricting food.
You got it. And now you're positioned to feel the way you did as a child. It will make you feel like you're that little girl again. That feeling will come back. And you'll end up being pissed and resentful, and you're going to get your food. And then you're going to feel bad and not know why you did it. And you're going to say, oh, because it tasted good. And I'm going to say, you're lying. Stop. It's not about the food. Right? So I'm hoping for you in this process is to, you know what? You need to let this go. You need to be done. You're not going to get out of this cycle the way if you have to fix your weight. Because ultimately, when did this cycle begin?
When I had to fix my weight.
You got it. And that's the beginning. That's how it all begins for most people. The moment I had to fix my weight was the beginning of the tension with food, the issues with food that were extreme, right? It was too much, overdone, where food becomes something it shouldn't be. And for you, because of your mother's issues, and it sounds like too, because it wasn't about fixing your weight at that point, it was an issue around real physical issues, and to have the food come back and to enjoy them and have that overcompensation with them, but then be put on a strict diet that took them away. My God, can you see how this began?
Well, yeah, it felt like punishment.
And then it became punishment. Yeah, where before you couldn't eat it, but it wasn't punishment.
Right.
And then to be given the freedom to eat it, can you see why as a child you would probably go overboard?
Yes.
And then
I figured that part out.
Right? And then you could say, well, of course then I'm going to gain weight. But because they had issues with my weight, they didn't let it naturally resolve, because it would have naturally resolved itself. So what happened, instead of naturally resolving it and letting this kind of release itself, which is what would have happened, they took it all away from you. The freedom to eat. And now there's resentment. And now there's deprivation. And now there's overcompensating, hiding the food. And as a child, you don't even know why. They wouldn't have known why because we didn't have the knowledge back then. And you've been living in that cycle ever since.
Yeah, I got it. I'm exhausted now.
Okay, good. So yeah, you just need to love yourself. Like really go in and forgive it all and give yourself just I'm not doing it anymore. There's a feeling of love that needs to be there for you.
Okay. I'll go back and listen to this one because I'm too tired now.
No worries. No worries, yeah. Well, and we're going deep. We're going deep. That's what happens.